Don't expect fear-mongering over the virus from me, though. We've had a long time now to get across the facts, and while there's still plenty of panic around the place and a host of challenges, too many in politics and the media are only too keen to fuel hysteria and fear. As of midnight tonight, most Victorians will have to wear a mask when they leave home. Most of that state's in lockdown. Its borders are closed off. They're heavily patrolled by South Australian and New South Wales police forces on either side. Almost 500 new coronavirus cases were confirmed today in that state, and 2 more deaths, sadly, both men in their 90s. Again, the first thing we need here is perspective. Most countries around the world, most provinces or regions throughout the world with populations of 6 million people like Victoria would happily swap places with Victoria. 500 new cases in a day, fewer than 50 people in intensive care beds, with thousands of extra critical care beds available. While Victoria's situation is far worse than the rest of the country at the moment, it's still far better than we could have dared to hope just back in March or April. And we might want to remember that we're all in this together. The blame game has simply been over the top. The enemy here is not Xi Jinping or international travellers. It's not Donald Trump or people who don't like masks. The enemy is not Daniel Andrews or the people of Victoria. The enemy is a virus that is invisible, ubiquitous, highly contagious, and even asymptomatic in half or more of the people it infects. And all the experts tell us we'll be dealing with this virus for many, many months to come, even years to come. So we're going to have to get a lot better at dealing with it. And having lectured Victorians, patronised them, frightened them, and warned them that playing golf could kill people, Daniel Andrews is now blaming them. He set extremely high expectations. He's failed to deliver on them, and now he's blaming Victorians.
I'm very unhappy and very sad to have to report that nearly 9 in 10, or 3,400 cases, did not isolate between when they first felt sick and when they went to get a test. Now, that's an interesting measure in that people have felt sick, they've got symptoms, and they've kept going shopping, they've kept going to work, they've kept doing, let's assume everybody followed the rules and they only went out for the 4 permitted reasons, which of course some may not have, but let's assume that. That means people have felt unwell and just gone about their business. They have gone out shopping, they have gone to work, they have been at the height of their infectivity, and they have just continued on as usual.
Look, this has got to change. This hectoring of the public, this blame shifting. Daniel Andrews and his government completely stuffed up quarantine. They turned an infection barrier into an infection spreader. But as I said, you don't want to get too hard on the blame game. You don't want to push that too hard, because this virus is highly contagious and has created chaos around the world. But having stuffed up on quarantine, you'd think Andrews would understand the difficulties of a disease that doesn't show symptoms often enough. Not only insists on blaming his own citizens, but he then threatens them with even more heavy-handed action. Now, no state can keep going on like this. He's suggesting that if Victorians don't pick up their game, that he's going to extend the lockdown even further, warning it'll be even longer than 6 weeks. You can't just keep putting states into lockdown, especially with active cases that represent now just 0.05% of the population. That's right, active cases in Victoria represent 0.05% of the population. Victoria has lost 44 elderly people to COVID-19 this year. That's very sad, and you need to try and control it. But it's lost almost 3 times that many to the road toll. Our political leaders have got to start to communicate and work better with their communities and be more realistic about the challenge. On the weekend, Daniel Andrews was punching down, mocking people who were complaining about being confined to their suburbs.
I've got a very clear message to every single Victorian, particularly some of those featured in social media. You know, whether you're in Broadmeadows or Brighton, stay at home means stay at home. And if walking your local streets is boring, well, being bored is much better than being in intensive care.
Look, his job is to lead, not to mock and to lecture. Now, the coronavirus is not the Victorian Premier's fault, and no leader has handled this perfectly. Everybody has learned on the job. But blaming your citizens is silly and counterproductive. Yet, predictably, left-wing media types have joined the pile-on. Former ABC host Adam Spencer tweeted, "Come on, Victoria, you're better than this." And ABC breakfast personality Michael Rowland wondered, what's wrong with people? It's so easy for people on government salaries who can isolate to their heart's content, isn't it? Other people are trying to go about their lives, fight for their livelihoods, as well as try to minimise infections. And as for Andrew's threatening even tougher lockdowns and stricter rules, this must now be starting to be seen across the country as the wrong approach. His Liberal counterpart in New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian, is talking tough on rule breakers too. But this is not a law enforcement issue. We've got to socially distance, we've got to wear masks where it's useful, keep up the hygiene, avoid unnecessary contact and travel, get tested and isolate if we're unwell. But governments need to inform us and support us and encourage us, not threaten us. There's always going to be some idiots, of course, but we've got to rely on the good sense of the overwhelming majority. We've got to do all of this voluntarily, out of self-interest and in the interests of others. And we're going to have to do it for a long time to come, much longer than any city lockdowns or border checkpoints can last. This is the reality. It's just a matter of how long it'll take us to wake up to it.